Clive Staples Lewis, otherwise known as C.S. Lewis, was born on November 29th, 1898 in Belfast, Ireland. He died on the 22nd of November, 1963, at age 64. Lewis wrote more than 30 books throughout his lifetime, which have been translated into more than 30 languages and have sold millions and millions and millions of copies. He has been called the apostle to the skeptics due to his approach on religious belief as a skeptic, and then his later conversion when he understood the truth of religion and separated that from the falsities of religion. His writings and career as a Christian apologist are often centered on human nature and morals. He tackles big questions, such as why does God let bad things happen to good people? And if you are looking for more of a scientific view from a man that can really bring a lot of insight in the scientific viewpoints of why God exists, how we can see God in nature, then I suggest you read the book called The Language of God by a man named Francis Collins. And Francis Collins was an atheist until he saw God in the science he was doing and converted himself into a man of God, just like C.S. Lewis on the literary side of things. And so Francis Collins was the head of the Human Genome Project, which discovered the DNA code. I'll put a link to where you can find more about what Francis Collins talks about in The Language of God, but for now, let's get into more of C.S. Lewis and his take on spirituality in The Great Divorce. In The Great Divorce, there's a man who takes a bus ride from hell all the way to heaven. And on this free bus ride, he learns many life lessons. He arrives in heaven with the rest of the bus crew who made it. But while in heaven, there are many more lessons to be learned until you can go further and further up the mountain. This imagery is used by C.S. Lewis not only in this book, but in the Chronicles of Narnia series, and it seems to be one of his favorite viewpoints on what heaven really is, always going onward and upward up the mountain in heaven. And so this is a sort of symbol for personal growth, spiritual connection with God, and an understanding of the nature of reality. And so in this book, there are many people who are suffering many things. They're coming from hell. The only one that isn't coming from hell on the bus is the bus driver. And so everyone who gets on has already made it further than many people, because many people had just left the line because the line was too long. They were waiting too long. They were getting frustrated and they had no patience, so that they just left their opportunity to go to heaven riding this free bus ride all the way up there. And so this book is very interesting. There's many different characters, philosophical conversations, very deep wisdom that's given from heaven to these citizens of hell, and pointing out different misunderstandings in their psyche and their perceptions. The first character that I want to tell you about in The Great Divorce is an intellectual man. This intellectual man comes from Greytown. He comes from hell. And he has obligations in hell. He's in an intellectual community in hell where they have conversations on theological topics. And he is a man who is meeting with a heavenly being who knew him in his earthly life. They were both on earth in life together. One went to heaven, the intellectual man went to hell. And so they meet, and in life, this intellectual man thought he was wiser, thought he was more intelligent than this heavenly being. He doesn't understand why he isn't in heaven with this heavenly being. If he can be smarter than him in life, why can't he be in heaven with him in death? And so this intellectual man has very solid, rigid beliefs about what reality is. He is very hard in heart. He believes himself to be smarter than everyone around him, and he even believes himself to be smarter than God. And so they have a unproductive conversation because this intellectual man is so hardened of heart that he cannot hear the words being told him by this heavenly being. And he eventually chooses to not go to heaven because he has obligations in hell. He has a speech that he's ready to give in hell. He has a intellectual community that he needs to get back to, and where he is heightening himself up, building himself up instead of really giving himself as a servant, as a child of God, instead of being an intellectual, I'm smarter than everyone kind of guy. If there's one main lesson that we can learn from the intellectual, it is that you cannot place yourself in a class system. If you know a certain amount of things, of facts, then you cannot place yourself above people who don't know those facts just because you know them. We are all strong in different areas, and that's why inanewway.com is designed specifically to be able to bring many different topics, many different insights from many different walks of life into one source so that we can all benefit from the truth that is being shared on that website. The next character I want to tell you about is a very weird kind of character. This is a fictional book, like I said, so this is a book where there's many different themes. It's very spiritual in nature. It's not a normal type of setting, but it's very symbolic. So this man has a lizard that's placed on his shoulder that's whispering lies into his ear at all times. And he comes across an angelic being while in heaven. And this angel tells him that he can rid him of this lizard, but first he has to kill it. And so the angel ends up killing this lizard at the man's consent. His free will allowed this angel to go ahead, reach out, and kill this lizard. But in the process, it burned the man. And so this is very symbolic. The lizard is representative of an addictive behavior. And the burning sensation is the pain that we have to go through in order to rid ourselves of the addiction. But the beautiful conclusion of this scene is the lizard, the addiction, turns into a stallion, and the man rides this stallion all the way up the mountains into heaven. That was the only thing holding him back, and it was the transport, freeing himself was the transport to being able to go up the mountains. The third character I'm going to tell you about is a man who also suffers from pride. Just like the intellectual, he is very self-haughty. He loves himself, he loves being famous, and he loves trying to shoot for that fame and being someone in the eyes of the world. He doesn't really care about God or anything else that is going on in the world. He's willing to take advantage of others, and he is also someone who suffers from anger, suffers from frustration and rage. And so this man ends up storming off from the angelic being who's trying to show him what heaven truly is like. This man wants to paint heaven, but he doesn't actually want to experience heaven. And so that is a major, major mistake. It's a misunderstanding, and it's something that is very, very selfish in the way that he does it. Thank you for tuning into another book review on A New Way with Noah. If you haven't already, go and subscribe to the OIC podcast, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon on both of those so that you can get notified when new podcasts and videos come out. We have many different topics, many different deep subjects planned for the future of both this channel and the OIC podcast, so we're really looking forward to diving deep with you on both of these channels. And we've already gone so deep in many of these videos and podcasts. I just appreciate every single one of you that is liking, sharing, and connecting with this information and appreciating what we do here, because all we're doing is sharing what we've learned in our own lives because it's benefited us, because we've applied it, and because it works. And so that's what In a New Way is all about. It's about living your life in a new way, learning in a new way, and being yourself in a new way, being authentic. Thank you for joining me for this video. You can catch me at inanewway.com or any one of these videos on this channel. Thanks for watching again, and I'll meet you on the next episode of A New Way with Noah.